The morning sun cast long shadows through the grand windows of Aldermore Palace, painting golden streaks across the marble floors where Prince William walked. His footsteps echoed in the vast corridor, each sound bouncing off centuries-old walls that had witnessed countless moments of joy and sorrow. At 32, William carried himself with the natural grace of someone born into royalty. Yet today, something felt different in the air. He paused near the portrait gallery, where generations of his ancestors gazed down with painted eyes that seemed to follow his every movement. His father, King Edmund, had always told him these portraits held the wisdom of their bloodline. William often found comfort here, especially during difficult times. But this morning, the familiar faces offered no solace for the unease settling in his chest. Lady Catherine, his private secretary, appeared at the far end of the corridor. Her usually composed face showed signs of distress, and she walked with unusual urgency. William had known Catherine since childhood. She had served the royal family for over 20 years. Never had he seen her look so troubled. "Your Highness," she said, slightly breathless as she approached. "The king requests your immediate presence in his private study. It's urgent." William felt his heart skip. His father rarely summoned him with such urgency unless matters of great importance were at hand. The last time had been when his mother, Queen Isabella, had fallen gravely ill 5 years ago. She had recovered, thankfully, but the memory of that terrible morning still haunted him. "Is everything all right, Catherine?" William asked, studying her face for clues. Catherine hesitated, her eyes darting away. "I believe His Majesty wishes to speak with you personally, Your Highness. Please, we mustn't delay." They walked swiftly through the palace, passing servants who bowed respectfully but seemed to avert their eyes more than usual. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken tension. William's mind raced with possibilities. Had something happened to his younger sister, Princess Margaret, who was currently on a diplomatic mission in the neighboring kingdom? Or perhaps there was a crisis in the realm that required immediate attention. As they approached the king's study, William noticed Dr. Harrison, the royal physician, exiting the room. The elderly doctor's face was grave, and he placed a gentle hand on William's shoulder as they passed. "Be strong, Your Highness," he whispered, before continuing down the corridor. William's anxiety peaked. The presence of the royal physician could mean only one thing. Someone was ill. He knocked on the heavy oak door and heard his father's voice, usually so commanding and strong, sound somehow diminished. "Enter." The study was dimly lit, curtains drawn against the morning sun. King Edmund sat behind his massive desk, but William immediately noticed how different his father appeared. The king, normally vibrant and energetic despite his 60 years, looked pale and drawn. His hands, usually steady and sure, trembled slightly as they rested on the desk's surface. "William, my son," Edmund said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Please, sit down." William obeyed, his concern growing with each passing second. "Father, what's wrong? Why has Dr. Harrison been here?" Edmund took a deep breath, and for the first time in William's memory, he saw tears forming in his father's eyes. The sight was so shocking that William instinctively leaned forward, reaching across the desk. "Father?" "William, there's no easy way to say this." Edmund's voice cracked slightly. "Dr. Harrison has completed a series of tests. The symptoms I've been experiencing, the fatigue, the pain..." He paused, gathering his composure. "I have been diagnosed with a rare blood disorder. The prognosis is not favorable." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. William felt as if the ground had suddenly shifted beneath him. His father, the invincible King Edmund, the man who had ruled Aldermore with wisdom and strength for over 25 years, was telling him he was dying. "No," William said, shaking his head. "There must be some mistake. You're strong, Father. You've always been strong." Dr. Harrison must be wrong. Edmund reached across the desk and took his son's hands. His grip, once powerful enough to wield the heaviest sword, now felt fragile. I've sought second and third opinions, my son. The finest physicians in the kingdom and beyond have examined me. The diagnosis is certain. How long? William's voice was barely a whisper. 6 months, perhaps 8 if I'm fortunate. Edmund squeezed his son's hands. But we must not dwell on the time we're losing. Instead, we must focus on preparing you for what's to come. William pulled his hands away and stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. He paced to the window, his mind refusing to accept what he'd heard. Outside, the palace gardens bloomed in perfect splendor, mockingly beautiful against the darkness of the moment. "William," his father called gently, "look at me, son." William turned, and through his tears he saw his father rising from the desk. Edmund moved slowly but deliberately, crossing the room to embrace his son. The embrace was that of a father comforting his child, not a king addressing his heir. "I know this is difficult," Edmund said softly, "but we must be strong. The kingdom needs stability. Your mother needs our strength. And you must prepare to take my place sooner than we ever imagined." William's composure finally broke. The prince, who had been trained since birth to show strength and dignity in all circumstances, fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the devastating reality. His father, his mentor, his hero, was dying. Edmund knelt beside his son, a gesture that would have scandalized the court had anyone witnessed it. A king did not kneel, but in this moment he was simply a father comforting his grieving son. "I'm not ready," William whispered through his tears. "I still have so much to learn from you." "You are more ready than you know," Edmund assured him. "You have your mother's compassion and my determination. You have trained for this role your entire life, and I will use every moment I have left to ensure you have all the wisdom I can share." They remained there for several minutes, father and son, king and prince, sharing a grief that transcended their titles. Finally, Edmund helped William to his feet. "There's more we must discuss," Edmund said, returning to his desk. "The council doesn't know yet. Only Dr. Harrison, your mother, and now you. We must plan how to announce this to the kingdom. Stability must be maintained." William wiped his eyes and straightened his shoulders. His father was right. Personal grief would have to wait. The responsibilities of the crown were already beginning to weigh upon him. "What about Margaret?" William asked, thinking of his sister. "I'll send word for her to return immediately," Edmund replied. "She deserves to hear this from me personally." They spent the next hour discussing practical matters, the transition of power, the management of state affairs, and the delicate process of preparing the kingdom for a change in monarchy. Edmund, ever the strategist, had already begun drafting plans to ensure a smooth succession. As their meeting drew to a close, Edmund stood and walked to a cabinet, retrieving a leather-bound journal. "I want you to have this," he said, handing it to William. "I've been writing in it since the day you were born. Thoughts, advice, memories, things I wanted to share with you when you became king. I had hoped to have many more years to fill its pages, but—" He trailed off. William accepted the journal with reverence. The leather was worn smooth from years of handling, and he could see his father's familiar handwriting on the edges of the pages. "Read it when you need guidance," Edmund said. "And know that even when I'm gone, my love and my faith in you will remain." William clutched the journal to his chest, fighting back fresh tears. "I love you, Father. I promise I'll make you proud." "You already have, my son. Every single day." As William left his father's study, the weight of his future pressed upon his shoulders. The corridors of Aldermore Palace, which had seemed so permanent and unchanging just an hour ago, now felt fragile and temporary. Everything was about to change. He paused again at the portrait gallery, looking up at the long line of kings who had ruled before his father. Soon Edmund's portrait would join them, and one day his own would too. The cycle of succession, as old as the kingdom itself, would continue. But for now, William had a dying father to support, a kingdom to prepare, and a destiny to accept. The young prince who had walked these halls in the morning sun was gone. In his place stood the future king, forged in a moment of devastating loss and profound responsibility. The weeks following the devastating revelation transformed life within Aldermore Palace. William threw himself into his new responsibilities with fierce determination, spending countless hours in the council chambers, studying state documents, and shadowing his father through every royal duty. Each day brought new lessons, but also the painful reminder that their time together was slipping away like sand through an hourglass. Queen Isabella handled the crisis with remarkable grace, though William often caught her staring into the distance during state dinners, her mind clearly elsewhere. She had taken to spending her mornings in the palace chapel, finding solace in prayer and meditation. The queen who had once filled the palace with laughter and music now moved through the halls with quiet dignity, saving her tears for private moments. Princess Margaret had returned from her diplomatic mission immediately upon receiving word. The reunion between father and daughter had been heartbreaking to witness. Margaret, usually so composed and diplomatic, had sobbed openly in Edmund's arms. Since then, she had become William's closest confidant, the only person with whom he could share his fears about the future. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Margaret told him one evening as they walked through the moonlit gardens. The autumn air was crisp, and the leaves crunched beneath their feet. "Father wouldn't want you to exhaust yourself." William paused near the fountain where they had played as children. "Every moment I'm not learning is a moment wasted, Margaret. There's so much I still don't know." "You can't learn 25 years of kingship in 6 months," she said gently, linking her arm through his. "Father knows that. The kingdom knows that." "Do they?" William's voice carried a note of bitterness. "The news will be announced tomorrow. After that, everyone will be watching me, waiting to see if I'm strong enough to fill his shoes." Edmund had decided to inform the kingdom of his illness, believing that transparency would prevent harmful rumors and allow for a dignified transition. The royal announcement was scheduled for the following morning, and William dreaded it more than any challenge he had ever faced. "They'll be watching because they care," Margaret assured him. "Father has been a beloved king. The people will support you because they loved him, and they'll see his strength in you." William wasn't convinced, but he appreciated his sister's faith. They continued their walk in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts about the changes ahead. The next morning dawned gray and somber, as if the weather itself anticipated the grave news. The great hall was filled to capacity with nobles, advisors, foreign ambassadors, and representatives from every corner of the kingdom. William stood beside his father's throne, with Margaret and their mother flanking them. Edmund, despite his illness, sat tall and regal, every inch the king he had always been. "My loyal subjects," Edmund began, his voice carrying across the hushed assembly. "I have ruled Aldermore for 25 years, and in that time we have known peace, prosperity, and unity. Today, I must share news that weighs heavy on my heart." William watched the faces in the crowd shift from curiosity to concern. Lord Blackwood, the kingdom's treasurer, gripped his staff more tightly. Ambassador Chen from the Eastern Territories leaned forward in her seat. Even the usually stoic palace guards showed flickers of emotion. "I have been diagnosed with a terminal illness," Edmund continued, his voice never wavering. "The physicians have given me perhaps 6 months to live. In this time, I will continue to serve you as I always have. But I must also prepare my son, Prince William, to assume the crown. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Several nobles immediately looked to William, their expressions ranging from sympathy to calculation. William forced himself to stand straighter, meeting their gazes with as much confidence as he could muster. "Prince William has been my pride and joy since the day he was born," Edmund said, gesturing to his son. "He has studied statecraft, military strategy, diplomacy, and law. He has shown wisdom beyond his years and compassion that reminds me of his blessed mother. I have no doubt that he will be a king worthy of your loyalty and love." William stepped forward as planned, his heart pounding. This was his first true test as the future king. "People of Aldermore," he began, surprised by how steady his own voice sounded. "I stand before you not just as your prince, but as a son facing the loss of his father. I know many of you are feeling the same shock and sorrow that my family experiences. King Edmund has been more than our monarch. He has been our guide, our protector, and our inspiration." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I cannot promise to immediately fill the void his passing will create. No one could, but I can promise you this. I will dedicate every breath in my body to serving this kingdom with the same devotion my father has shown. I will learn from his wisdom while he remains with us, and I will honor his legacy when he is gone." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Then, Lord Blackwood stepped forward and knelt. "Long live the king," he said, his voice carrying clearly, "and long live the future king." One by one, others followed suit. Soon the entire hall knelt before Edmund and William, their voices joining in the ancient pledge of loyalty. William felt tears prick his eyes, but blinked them back. This was not the time for weakness. After the assembly dispersed, the royal family retreated to their private quarters. Edmund was visibly exhausted, and Dr. Harrison insisted he rest. As William helped his father to his chambers, Edmund gripped his arm. "You did well today," he said softly. "Your words were from the heart. That's what the people need. Authenticity, not perfection." "I meant every word, Father." "I know you did. That's why they believed you." Over the following weeks, the kingdom's reaction to the news varied. Most citizens expressed genuine sorrow and support for the royal family. Prayers were offered in temples across the land, and messages of love poured into the palace. However, William also noticed the subtle political maneuvering beginning among certain noble houses. Some saw the impending transition as an opportunity to gain influence with the future king. Lord Pemberton, whose daughter Eleanor was of marriageable age, suddenly became very interested in inviting William to social gatherings. The Duke of Westshire, who had long advocated for military expansion, began scheduling meetings to discuss future defensive strategies. Even foreign kingdoms sent delegations, ostensibly to offer condolences, but clearly also to assess the stability of Aldermore's succession. William navigated these political waters with growing skill, aided by his father's counsel and his mother's insights into court intrigue. He learned to read between the lines of every conversation, to understand the motivations behind every gesture of support. One particularly challenging situation arose when Count Aldrich, a powerful noble with significant military forces, requested a private audience. William received him in the lesser throne room, a deliberate choice to establish authority while avoiding the presumption of sitting on his father's throne. "Your Highness," Aldrich began, his scarred face unreadable, "these are troubling times for the kingdom. Your father's illness leaves us vulnerable. Perhaps it would be wise to consider a regency council to assist you when the time comes." William recognized the probe for what it was, a test of his resolve and an attempt to dilute royal power. "Count Aldrich, I appreciate your concern for the kingdom's stability. However, my father is still our king, and he prepares me daily for the responsibilities ahead. When the time comes for me to assume the throne, I will do so fully and completely, as is my birthright and duty. Of course, Your Highness. I merely thought— You thought to be helpful, I'm sure, William interrupted smoothly. And I value the loyalty and support of all our noble houses. That support will be crucial in maintaining the unity my father has worked so hard to build. I trust I can count on yours. The Count's eyes narrowed slightly, but he bowed. Always, Your Highness. After Aldrich left, William found his hands were shaking. He had successfully navigated his first real political challenge, but the encounter left him drained. How had his father managed such conversations for 25 years? As autumn progressed into winter, Edmund's condition gradually worsened. The strong king, who had once led armies and hunted wild boar, now tired after short walks in the garden. Yet his mind remained sharp, and he used every lucid moment to prepare his son. They would sit for hours in the king's study, Edmund sharing stories that were also lessons. He told William about the delicate balance required to maintain peace with neighboring kingdoms, about the importance of listening to common citizens as much as nobles, about the burden of making decisions that would affect thousands of lives. A king must be many things, Edmund said one snowy afternoon, wrapped in furs despite the roaring fireplace. A warrior when the kingdom is threatened, a diplomat when peace must be negotiated, a judge when justice is sought, and a father to all his people. But above all, William, a king must be human. Never let the crown make you forget your humanity. William absorbed these lessons like a sponge, writing notes in his own journal each night. He found himself referring often to the journal his father had given him, finding comfort and guidance in Edmund's written words from years past. His relationship with Margaret deepened during this time as well. She had taken on many of their mother's ceremonial duties, allowing Isabella to spend more time with Edmund. Margaret also served as William's advisor on matters of court etiquette and diplomacy, areas where her natural gifts exceeded his own. "You're becoming more kingly every day," she told him one evening as they reviewed documents together. "I barely recognize the brother who once put frogs in my bed." William managed a smile. "Those days seem like a lifetime ago. I feel as though I've aged 10 years in the past 3 months." "Growth often comes through hardship," Margaret said wisely. "Father's illness is a tragedy. But look how it has brought out the best in you. You're becoming the king Aldermore needs." Not everyone shared Margaret's confidence. William overheard servants whispering about whether he was too young, too inexperienced. Some nobles continued their political games, testing his resolve and judgment. Foreign kingdoms watched carefully for signs of weakness. But William persevered, driven by love for his father and duty to his kingdom. He attended every council meeting, reviewed every treaty, and met with every petitioner who came to the palace. Slowly but surely, he was earning respect through his dedication and growing wisdom. Winter's grip on Aldermore tightened as King Edmund's strength continued to fade. The palace, once filled with the sounds of state business and courtly life, had grown quieter, as if the very walls sensed the approaching end of an era. William had taken on nearly all of his father's daily duties, though Edmund insisted on appearing at crucial state functions, his pride and sense of responsibility overcoming his physical weakness. The transformation in William was remarkable. The uncertain young man who had fallen to his knees in his father's study had evolved into a confident leader. His decisions in council meetings showed wisdom and careful consideration. His handling of a trade dispute with the Southern Territories had even impressed Lord Blackwood, who rarely offered praise to anyone. Yet despite his growing competence, William treasured most the quiet moments with his father. They would sit together in the king's chambers, sometimes talking, sometimes sharing comfortable silence. Edmund's body was failing, but his spirit remained unbroken. One particularly cold evening in late winter, Edmund summoned his family to his bedside. The royal physician had privately informed them that the king's time was measured in days, not weeks. Isabella sat beside her husband, holding his hand, while William and Margaret stood close by. "My beloved family," Edmund began, his voice weak but clear, "I have been blessed beyond measure. A loving wife who has been my strength, children who are my pride, and a kingdom at peace. Many kings have had longer reigns, but few have been as fortunate as I." Isabella's tears flowed freely now, and she made no effort to hide them. "Save your strength, my love," she whispered. Edmund smiled at her with the same tenderness he had shown for over 30 years of marriage. "I have saved my strength for this moment, Isabella. There are things I must say while I still can." He turned to Margaret. "My daughter, you have your mother's grace and intelligence. Your diplomatic skills have already served our kingdom well. Continue to be William's advisor and support. He will need your wisdom in the days ahead." Margaret knelt beside the bed, taking her father's other hand. "I promise, Father. I will always stand by William and serve Aldermore faithfully." Edmund's gaze shifted to William. "My son, my heir, my future king. The journey you began months ago has transformed you. I see in you not just my successor, but a king who will surpass even my achievements. You have learned the lessons of statecraft, but more importantly, you have kept your heart open to compassion and justice." William struggled to maintain his composure. "Everything I am, everything I will be, I owe to you and Mother. I pray I can be half the king you have been." "You will be more," Edmund said with conviction. "You will be the king Aldermore needs for the future. Times are changing, William. New ideas, new challenges await. Meet them with courage and wisdom." The king closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his remaining strength. When he opened them again, they were filled with peace. "I have one final request. When I am gone, do not let the kingdom mourn for too long. Aldermore must look forward, not backward. Celebrate what we have built together, then continue building." They remained together through the night, sharing memories and expressing their love. Edmund spoke of his proudest moments, his coronation, his wedding day, the births of his children, the peace treaty that had ended decades of conflict with the Eastern Territories. He also shared his regrets, small as they were, mostly centered on time he wished he had spent more wisely. As dawn broke over Aldermore Palace, painting the snow-covered landscape in soft pink and gold, King Edmund drew his last breath. He passed peacefully, surrounded by those he loved most, his final words a whispered blessing for his family and kingdom. The bells of the palace began to toll, their solemn rings carrying across the capital city and beyond. Soon, bells throughout the kingdom would echo their lament, announcing to all that King Edmund the Wise, as history would remember him, had passed into eternal rest. William stood frozen beside his father's bed, the reality of the moment overwhelming him. The crown was now his, but all he could think about was that he would never again hear his father's voice or receive his counsel. Queen Isabella, now the Queen Mother, rose with remarkable dignity. Despite her grief, she knew what must be done. "The king is dead," she said softly, then turned to William with tears streaming down her face. "Long live the king." Margaret echoed the words, and soon the phrase was taken up by the guards and servants who had gathered outside the chamber. But William barely heard them. He knelt beside his father's still form, taking the cold hand one last time. "I will make you proud," he whispered. "I swear it." The days that followed were a blur of ceremony and ritual. The kingdom mourned deeply, with citizens traveling from far and wide to pay their respects. The funeral procession through the capital was attended by hundreds of thousands, all come to bid farewell to their beloved king. William, now King William, moved through these ceremonies with a grace that surprised even himself. He delivered the eulogy in the great cathedral, his words celebrating his father's life rather than dwelling on the loss. He spoke of Edmund's vision for Aldermore, his dedication to peace and prosperity, and his unwavering love for his people. "My father asked that we not mourn for too long," William concluded. "He wanted us to look forward, to continue building the kingdom he loved. So today, as we lay him to rest beside his ancestors, I ask you to join me in honoring his memory not through tears, but through action. Let us make Aldermore a kingdom that would make him smile from whatever realm he now inhabits." The coronation took place 1 month later, as tradition demanded. William had insisted on a ceremony that balanced grandeur with humility, wanting to honor the crown while remembering his father's lessons about humanity. As the archbishop placed the heavy crown upon his head, William felt the full weight of his destiny. But alongside the burden came a strange sense of peace. His father had prepared him well, and he was surrounded by those who would support him, his mother's wisdom, Margaret's counsel, and the loyalty of good people like Lord Blackwood and Lady Catherine. The first months of William's reign were crucial. He moved carefully but decisively, implementing some reforms his father had discussed but hadn't lived to see completed. He established a royal council that included not just nobles, but representatives from merchant guilds and farming communities, believing that all voices deserved to be heard in governance. He also surprised many by choosing to marry for love rather than pure political advantage. Lady Eleanor Pemberton, whom Lord Pemberton had pushed forward, was indeed beautiful and well-connected. But William had fallen in love with Lady Sarah Hartwell, the daughter of a minor noble family known for their charitable works and intellectual pursuits. Sarah shared William's vision for a more inclusive kingdom, and their partnership strengthened his reign. Queen Mother Isabella found new purpose in establishing a foundation in Edmund's memory, dedicated to education and healing arts. She said it was what Edmund would have wanted, to continue serving the people even after death. Margaret became William's chief diplomat, her skills helping to negotiate new trade agreements and strengthen alliances. She never married, choosing instead to dedicate her life to service, though rumors of a secret love affair with a foreign prince persisted for years. 1 year after Edmund's death, William stood in the portrait gallery where this story began. A new painting had been added, King Edmund in his prime, looking regal yet approachable, the slight smile that William remembered so well captured perfectly by the artist. Sarah found him there, as she often did when he needed moments of reflection. She slipped her hand into his, providing silent support. "I still miss him," William admitted. "Every day, I face decisions where I wonder what he would have done." "But you make those decisions with wisdom and compassion," Sarah reminded him. "The kingdom prospers under your rule. Your father would be proud." William touched the journal in his pocket, Edmund's journal, which he carried always. He had read every entry multiple times, finding new insights with each reading. But he had also begun adding his own entries, continuing the tradition for the heir that would one day follow him. "Do you remember what he told me?" William asked. "That a king must be many things, but above all he must be human?" Sarah nodded, squeezing his hand. "I understand now what he meant," William continued. "It's our humanity that connects us to our people, our joys, our sorrows, our fears and hopes. They're universal. The crown doesn't elevate us above human experience. It requires us to embrace it more fully." As they stood together in the gallery, William reflected on the journey that had begun with devastating news. His father's death had been a profound loss, but from that grief had grown strength, wisdom, and purpose. The young prince who had fallen to his knees had risen as a king. The palace bells began to chime the noon hour, and William straightened his shoulders. There was a council meeting to attend, petitioners to hear, and a kingdom to serve. Edmund was gone, but his legacy lived on through his son's reign. "Shall we go, my king?" Sarah asked gently. William took one last look at his father's portrait, drawing strength from those painted eyes that seemed to offer eternal encouragement. "Yes," he said, turning toward his future. "We have work to do." As they walked through the corridors of Aldermore Palace, William's steps were sure and purposeful. He had learned the hardest lesson any heir must face, that the crown comes with a price of loss and sacrifice. But he had also learned that with love, wisdom, and dedication, a good king could transform that loss into a legacy of hope. The devastating news that had once brought him to his knees had ultimately raised him to his destiny. King William the Just, as history would know him, had been forged in the crucible of grief and emerged worthy of his father's throne and his people's trust. The kingdom of Aldermore continued to flourish under his rule for many years, a testament to the enduring power of Edmund's final lesson. That true kingship lies not in the crown worn upon the head, but in the love carried within the heart for one's people and purpose.